Good evening, everybody. I think it's time. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. And I don't think I have any apologies for just looking at the minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments from any member? No. Can I take them as approved then? John and Ulrikrin, thank you. And declarations of interest.
Yes, Chairman. I have to declare a personal interest in agenda item 38, shareholders report, as I am an unpaid non-executive director of Lodon Homes.
And I too have to declare an interest in the same issue. But I'm the an unpaid non-executive director of WBC Holdings Limited.
As do I, Chairman. I'm an unpaid non-executive director of Optalis, WBC Holdings, and Wokingham Housing, and Berrybrook Homes, all unpaid.
And the same for me, Chair.
And me, Chair.
Just WBC, not the rest.
WBC Holdings.
I'm a director of Optalis, non-executive.
Any more? Stuart, yes. Wayne, thank you very much. Come to public question time.
Thank you. The Lingard report, which Wokingham has decided not to place on its website, but is available to anyone who contacts the Council, was ordered by the previous leader of the Council following the Court of Appeal Criminal Division's decision to uphold a decision of Reading Crown Court to halt the Hare Hat Sheeplands breach of enforcement trial. In the opinion of the Reading Crown Court judge, particular Wokingham councillors and officials had committed abuse of power in the course of bringing the case to Reading Crown Court, rendering the case against HHS, quotes, unfair and unjust. The trial accordingly collapsed. In her summing up at the Court of Appeal Criminal Division hearing into Wokingham's appeal against the decision of Reading Crown Court, Lady Justice Hallett declared the Reading Crown Court judge's finding that Wokingham had induced Mr. Scott to act to his detriment and then taken advantage of the situation, in our view, must stand. This finding of fact has been established at Reading and confirmed by the Court of Appeal. Only a successful appeal by Wokingham to the Supreme Court could overturn the Reading Crown Court and the Court of Appeal. Such an appeal has not been made by Wokingham. The terms of reference to the Lingard investigation were to assess whether, in the light of the two courts' decisions, particular councillors, including the current leader and deputy leader, and particular officials were guilty of maladministration. But additionally, and we did not know this until the Lingard report was published, Mr. Lingard was invited by Wokingham to review various issues, including the judgments of Reading Crown Court and the Court of Appeal. The Lingard report has openly, disrespectfully and unlawfully challenged and rejected the opinions of both the Crown Court and the Court of Appeal. Lingard has declared that the courts were wrong to find that Wokingham unjustly and unfairly induced Mr. Scott to withdraw a crucial appeal. Lingard has said that the courts had based their conclusions on, quotes, supposition and a lack of clear evidence, unquote. It is simply not permissible for Lingard to challenge and discredit the court's rulings. As a result, the Lingard report has discredited itself and it lacks any merit. Lingard has turned out to be a rerun of the evidence presented at Reading Crown Court, and the disrespect and contempt shown by Lingard towards the courts is, in my view, absolutely unacceptable, and the report, and indeed Mr. Lingard, may now be subject to legal intervention and possible withdrawal. The Lingard report has thus been a waste of Wokingham residents' council tax. On top of this, Mr. Lingard has disclosed that he was briefed by Wokingham last year to investigate concerns by Reading Crown Court about a shortage of evidence supplied by Wokingham in the early stages of Wokingham's prosecution of HHS. Shall I stop, Mr. Halthorne? No? Continue. I have been advised and surprised that last year's report by Mr. Lingard is not available because it never existed. In short, Mr. Lingard's independence, fundamental to the integrity and credibility of his investigation, has been materially compromised. The present report, which I don't think many members of the executive have seen, contains over 300 redactions, ostensibly to protect the identification of the individuals involved. The redactions are absurd and pointless because the officials are identifiable by their job titles and their personal identities are clearly shown on the Wokingham website. The councillors are equally easily identifiable. But far more significantly, 11 complete paragraphs of evidence, mainly from two councillors, Mr. Hulsell and Mr. Kaiser, have been deleted from the original report delivered to Wokingham in July. Either they, or Wokingham, or both, are determined that the whole truth should not be made known. Whilst these 11 redactions remain in place, the Lingard report is worthless because everybody else, be they members of this council, the officials and staff who run the council, and the residents of the borough are prevented from knowing what Mr. Hulsell and Mr. Kaiser clearly regarded as something which must be kept secret. Having put the issue into that context, here is my question. Bearing in mind Mr. Lingard's disclosure of his investigation last year leads inevitably to conclude his independence has been compromised, and two, the 300 plus redactions and 11 redacted paragraphs. Will the Leader of the Council accept the only possible conclusion that the Lingard report should be scrapped and be replaced by a properly independent and law-respecting investigation into maladministration and misconduct in Wokingham's handling of its prosecution of Hare Hatch Sheeplands?
Thank you very, very much for that very, very long question. My short response is that I do not accept that the Lingard report should be scrapped. You make some serious allegations about Mr. Lingard's independence and state that his report is unlawful, both of which the Council would strongly refute. As one of the residents who expressed concern about the Court of Appeal judgment, the Council has worked closely with you and at length from the start of the year, which has included you meeting with the Chief Executive and also speaking to Mr. Lingard during his review. The Council has endeavoured to be open with you and listen to your concerns, and at no time prior to you reading Mr. Lingard's report did you raise concerns about his independence. You question Mr. Lingard's independence because of his involvement in the review of the email searches conducted towards the end of 2017, a fact which he discloses himself in the report in section 14.3. The two tasks he undertook for the Council were entirely separate from each other and stood alone, and in reaching his conclusions on the Hare Hatch matter, he placed no reliance on his conclusions in relation to the earlier matter. The Monitoring Officer has spoken with Mr. Lingard, who confirms this. With regard to the redactions of the report, the Council has a duty of care to protect the personal information of its staff. This is standard practice, but I acknowledge that this makes it slightly more difficult to read the report. However, to call it worthless is an exaggeration. Please acknowledge that the executive summary of the report is not subject to any redaction and transparently sets out a balance of conclusions, including the learning of lessons in terms of procedure and, in particular, the proper documentation of negotiations and the management of complex cases. These lessons are valuable to the Council and will help us to improve our management of similar cases in the future. Do you have a supplementary question, Philip?
I do. Mr. Lingard wrote at paragraph 14.8 on page 36, quote, "It became clear to me during the course of my inquiries that none of the councillors professed or indeed had any knowledge of planning law and procedure," unquote. You say you were doing your best in the press release that's been issued to resolve the planning and enforcement issues of your constituent. But the courts were overwhelmingly convinced that you and your colleagues were part of an unfair and unjust set of actions, conduct and behaviour. And Lingard found that you had no knowledge of planning law and procedure. And then you've insisted that key elements of your investigation interviews should be kept secret. Your defence of your conduct, such that it is in tatters. Accordingly, it's difficult to avoid the conclusion you are unfit to uphold the integrity of the positions you hold as council leader and Councillor Kaiser as your deputy. Under such circumstances, will you and Councillor Kaiser tell me and the members present tonight and the residents of the borough why you should be seriously considering standing down as leader and deputy leader?
Thank you for that question. As this is in effect an affair of the monitoring officer, he will give you a reply in writing.
Could I just ask a point of order? I'm very surprised, John, you actually answered something which is directly related to you. I thought you would have declared an interest and had another person answer, that's all. I'm just inquiring.
Thank you very much. I did take advice on that. And the advice was I was responsible for the council in this capacity, and I shouldn't respond other than through the monitoring officer. I think we've done the public questions, have we? So is Chris here? No, we'll do a question and answer in writing. Gary.
Thank you, John. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name.
Good evening, Gary. You're keeping me very busy. What did you say? There's more coming on Thursday? Oh, okay. All planning applications, as you know, recommended for approval, whether they are private or council developments, are considered against the council's adopted and emerging guidance, including its parking standards. All council schemes require approval by the council's planning committee, which would ensure consistency in these matters. The council's emerging guidance on electric vehicles states, E6, I can provide you with these copies, I'll send them to you. For non-residential land using and including employment, leisure, education and retail, EV charging points will also be required. Land users with shorter stays, such as leisure and retail, should consider rapid chargers. Where they are active, the EV parking bays will need to be marked out and signed. The following minimum levels of provision will be required if there is car parking. Passive and active, 1 charging point for every 20 spaces. 5% of the car parking spaces to be passive and 5% active for purposes of more than the 20 spaces. In addition to this, further EV charging information and guidance is becoming available for central government and the Department of Transport. As the council progresses, as you know, the local plan, we will be looking at and will be updating and have the opportunity to review the current parking and EV charging requirements. The parking provision for Matthews Green scheme, being Refence, was discussed on the night of the committee and was given around clarification the provision of disabled parking, which is located within the retail area and not in the residential element in respect to EV charging, and the following condition was applied to accommodate this. Prior to the first occupation of the residential units, details of electrical vehicle charging within the local centre and the car park shall be submitted to the council for written approval. The details, as approved, shall be installed prior to the first occupation and shall be maintained thereafter, unless otherwise agreed in writing with the council. I can provide all that to you.
Thank you, Wayne. That's very, very helpful. Looking at the request for climate advice in the press today, and IMD 26, which I'm very pleased to say was postponed to the 2nd of October instead of earlier on this evening. I'm hoping my supplementary will be considered helpful. Where I have difficulty is getting my head around is the EU legislation goes back to July 18, and as we're in a climate emergency, the building blocks are available for us to use the building regs and planning changes now and not tomorrow to affect changes other planning authorities have already done. The report, this report here, the executive decision which is delayed to next week, it goes on to say the saving in installing a retrofit situation for a charging point, the saving is £1,000 against a retrofit which is over £2,000. If all goes to plan, from now to 2026, we're scheduled to build another 5,600 houses, but using the guidelines set out in IMD 26 report, only 300 houses will have on-plot charging points. The other 5,300 won't. From 2026 to 2030, where we will be carbon neutral, we will build another 4,000 odd houses, and only 800 of those will have on-plot charging points. My question is, if we follow the schedule, how does this delayed introduction fit in with climate neutral 2030, when the occupants of about 9,500 houses will not have on-plot charging, and it will cost them about 2k a plot to get it? Will that encourage them to buy an electric car? Is this not an opportunity, this report here, which the executive IMD 26 is being dealt with next week, to rewrite IMD 26 to further the Council's aims and ambitions in its climate change emergency planning?
I think you're absolutely right, Gary, and I think the emerging local plan, as we've got another major issue on that, which is parking standards, we do need to consider that, and I agree with you. The sooner we get the detail out, I think anything we can do that will help getting carbon neutral, because that's not going to be an easy task, being carbon neutral by 2030.
I appreciate it.
Having spent the last 20 years in energy efficiency, I know how difficult it is. But I do agree. I think it's something that we are going to have to seriously look at and get provision in all of our new houses that they have that.
My only suggestion is if you rewrite this before next week, to take these factors into consideration, you're taking a major step in the right direction. That's really all I'm trying to say. It's helpful. I'm being helpful.
I have a somewhat shorter question than previously. Why is Woking Housing Limited using a private company for building regulations rather than WBC's own building regulations?
Thank you for that question, Rochelle. As a commercial company, WHL need to ensure value for money and performance delivery across all areas of work. Initially, WHL employed WBC building controlled shared services on all projects. However, in 2018, we have agreed recently with WBC Building Control to change their approach and to seek a quote on a project-by-project basis, with WBC Building Control invited to quote on each occasion. All quotes received are then assessed against an agreed criteria and in line with current procurement policies and procedures to ensure the best possible value for money is secured. That said, we are constantly looking at services offered by the Council with a view to utilising those services and provided they do not disadvantage either the operating company or the Council operationally or financially, we will use this service as delivered by the Council. This will allow us to exploit the synergies which exist between our wholly owned companies and the Council.
Well, I've spoken to the head of building regulations for WBC. It would be very nice to actually fund and adequately staff the group, so therefore we can have something. What are you doing to improve WBC building regulations department to make it more efficient and more cost effective for council-owned companies so they don't spend the money elsewhere other than our own council services?
We are doing a review of our our house building activity at the moment, and I will be announcing a strategy in the not too distant future, and that will include using parts of the council to provide services such as administration and invoicing, because there is absolutely an accounting. So there's no, and one of the areas we will be looking at building control and what we need to do to enable to use our service. As I say, we're going to be looking at it and deciding what we need in the way of resources to enable to use its service.
A council should be prepared to provide its residents with information on all areas of its activity, including those that show the council in a poor light, as well as those that show good practice. It has come to my attention that Woking Borough Council are now selectively deciding which documentation, that's relating to WBC actions and areas of responsibility, it puts onto its website. Can the council advise how this has been allowed to happen?
Thank you for your question. Although it's not entirely clear whether you're making a general point or referring to something in particular. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you may be referring to the recent independent review of the Council's planning enforcement actions against Hare Hash Cheaplands, a period which we both undertook together. The Council's published a press release on the 27th of August, which set out the findings of the review, and quoted Mr. Lingard's report, where he concluded that the Council did not, either through its elected members or its officers, induce Mr. Scott, either by intentional design or default, to act to his detriment by withdrawing his appeal against an enforcement notice. The press release also acknowledged some training needs which are being actioned. Therefore, I would refute your assertion that the Council has been selective or unbalanced in what it published. It is not normal practice to publish reports such as this on our website. However, can I also add that those residents who either expressed concerns about this matter or requested Mr. Lingard's report have been provided a copy of this report. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I have. At the time of submitting my questions, submitting my question, neither of the appeal court judgments, the June 18 or the January 19 cases relating to Hare Hash Cheaplands were on our website. The Lingard report, as you have just declared, is available for residents, but they have to know it's available to ask for it. And thirdly, another document which I cannot find on the website is an employment tribunal, where a previous member of staff has successfully had a case for when she was working here. Cannot find them on our website. All four, in fact there's 4 documents, show the council to have not performed properly. I would like to know how the council is going to improve if it is not prepared to publish documentation which actually puts it into a poor light. And could I have answers to that, please?
I have no detailed knowledge of how the website works. In fact, it's a mystery to me and everybody of my age. However, I don't think that the assertion that the council's hiding information is a reasonable assertion. But I'm prepared to look into it and come back to you.
Thank you, John. My question is to you. As the Council has declined to respond to a Freedom of Information request on this topic, can the Council advise me what actions they have taken in relation to preparing for a no-deal Brexit? Could this include any impacts on the provision of services to our local residents and any actions that may need to be performed by the Council should this event actually happen?
I think I covered that in the speech at council, but I'll reiterate it. Yellowhammer was restricted. In fact, it was so restricted that I didn't even know that we were working on it ourselves. In the light of government releasing these details, the council can share more information and has shared more information as to its preparations. The council has established an officer group of managers from across the authority to plan Brexit for Brexit. The group is now meeting weekly, and that's been escalated. It's a matrix of a government resilience planning, and it actually started prior to the March date, as I said in council. The range of subject areas the council is preparing for includes, but not limited to, supply chain disruptions, schools, meals, personal protective equipment, etc. Staffing, possible loss of staff originating from the EU27, social care and RE3 have been identified as having the highest exposure to date. Data potential that we are unable to access our own data on data stored within the EU. Major projects, potential for construction projects to be delayed or over budget due to supply chain and currency fluctuations. Regulation, trading standards, food safety and environmental protection. Possible capacity issues due to additional work required. The planning environment has now included, as I announced to Council, Pauline and I, and as we come nearer the date and the event, if it occurs, then that will be extended to the opposition members.
Yes, I do. I'm sorry I missed the council meeting where I think you talked about this.
Thinking of cancelling it because you weren't there.
That's typically generous of you. So my supplementary is, do you think that the council has been properly resourced by central government to cope with no deal?
Let me answer that question by really posing a question to you. It's the same question I posed to myself, is that we're not really in the forefront of the problems that might occur. And therefore, yes, probably. Yes, probably. But I won't know till we completely elaborate the planning and what the planning without a withdrawal agreement means, because there is a lot of very loose talk about what no deal means, but there is no such thing as no deal because there's a structure of agreements which are already there. So it needs to be able to answer your question completely. We need to establish what the environment is which we're dealing with at the time, and at the moment we're not that clear. If it happens at all, you know.
Sorry. It was interesting that you said that Yellowhammer was restricted. So didn't you know what was happening with that?
You asked a supplementary question. Did I know that what was happening? I knew as much as you did, quite honestly. But I think the officers who were also restricted in the information they could share, even with myself, have done a typically excellent job in filling out the blanks. So we're not without a response if a response is needed. You're not going to ask a fourth one, you know. Thank you.
We all know about a Yellowhammer. A little bit of bread and no cheese. That's what we'll be eating.
I'm afraid that the time's up for questions, so we need to move on. Thank you very much.
No, it's not. Not more. Move on to.
I'm clearly a beginner at this game. We're taking more questions. So, the question is Pauline.
Sorry, that was, thought I'd been, now I've got to find it. No, I know I asked it. I just shut the paperwork because I thought I was, I'd not got the opportunity. Right, make sure I get the wording right. I'd like to ask Charles Muggetts, how do we monitor how satisfied our residents are with the adult social services from WBC? I know.
And I'm going to answer it facing this way as well, though. Anyway, we have many ways in which we monitor this. A comments feedback sheet is sent to customers with all completed assessments, including carers assessments, reassessments and reviews. There's a quarterly report on the feedback, both positive and areas for improvement. Mental health service, joint health and social care have a friends and family scheme to invite and gather feedback. In addition to this, there's an annual survey for all adult social care customers. It's a government requirement that we have to carry this out. This includes two areas: overall satisfaction and feeling safe. Satisfaction results for the last survey for the financial year 18-19 showed that 67.1% of customers felt they were extremely or very satisfied. The national average was 65%. For feeling safe, the same period, 74%. And the national average is 69.9. Although these are good scores, there's obviously room for improvement, and we're working to get these figures into the top quartile nationally through our improvement plans in the department.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'll now try and look at you as well as asking a question. Are there any plans you'd like to share about how you will monitor progress and share this information about performance going forward?
Sure. It's something very conscious of. Basically, there's obviously financial pressures in this department, as there are in all, but we've got to make sure that not only do we respond to things basically quickly, but the quality of response is correct. And myself and we have a monthly session, myself and the Director of Adult Social Care. We go through the 16 key criteria to make sure they're all going the right way, or when they're not, that we're taking immediate corrective action. So very keen to improve this and keep moving forwards.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, I can't see you, but I'm going to ask you a question. Could you give me an update on the changes to the Blue Badge scheme, including progress on processing new applications?
Thank you, Ulla Corinne. I think some people might not know that customer service falls under my remit, which is why I'm answering this question. So changes to Blue Badge legislation mean that applicants can consider applying for a Blue Badge if they have non-visible or hidden conditions which causes them to severely struggle with journeys between a vehicle and their destination. Applications are assessed by considering individual needs alongside supplementary information submitted by the applicant. If there is not enough evidence to initially support their application, we will request further information from them. Since launch on the 30th of August, we've seen an additional 52 applications in the first week and a further 23 in the second week. Currently, these cases are taking approximately 2 weeks to process, as the team are working hard to absorb the increases alongside standard applications, with 175 applications in total received in this 2-week period. Of all the cases we have referred to occupational therapists, so far 3 badges have been awarded immediately under the hidden disability criteria. The occupational therapist is unable to fully determine most applications until additional professional supplementary evidence is supplied as per the DFT guidelines. We were giving people up to 20 days to supply this. We're now entering into a period of increased contact from applicants. They are providing us with further evidence so that we can consider their cases and request supplementary information if we initially determine that we need it. To date, we have not received any negative comments or feedback from customers. Our targeted and clear communications before launch have helped immensely to educate and guide people through this process. And I would add to this that the officers responsible for delivering this weren't given a huge amount of guidance from the DFT and weren't given a huge amount of time to deliver against this expectation. So the fact that they've been able to deliver this without complaint so far from our residents, process all of these additional applications with the team that they've got is absolutely superb, and they deserve all of our compliments and all of our congratulations for doing it.
Question to Ulla Karim. Climate change and the recently recognised climate emergency is the major concern of our times. What action is Councillor Clark taking to ensure the voice of our children and young people is heard?
Thank you for your question. I'm pleased to announce that Children's Services have employed a project support officer for climate emergency. Her name is Ellen Lucas. She will be with us for 3 days a week for 6 months, working with schools, children and young people to engage them in working towards the Council's vision to be a carbon neutral authority by 2030. She recently graduated from the University of York with a BA in History and Philosophy and has worked as a lead member for the National Citizen Service, as well as working with migrants and refugees at Refugee Action York and volunteering in South African townships, teaching, among other things, first aid, health and computer. She is passionate about the climate change agenda, and I'm sure you will join me in welcoming her to the role. I think it's fantastic we have been able to do this because, as we all know, who have children, they never listen to us. So it's more likely that with somebody closer in age to young people, there will be more engagement. Thank you.
An observation, it's obvious you as the executive, you don't talk to one another.
We are too busy.
Of course, if we talk to each other and don't tell you, you don't benefit from the answers. So we're sharing the information with you.
I think I talk more to you, Lindsay, actually.
Come on in. Thank you.
I already had the answer from Sarah on the first one. Thank you very much, because I asked about it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, Chairman, I'd like to give the shareholders' report. We'll do this in 2 parts. I'll do the housing bit, and I'll then leave it for Charles, who is to do the Optilis bit. Really, this is just to be noted, but I'll just give you some top-line numbers. WHL so far built 145 homes, and the number of starts in progress 72 plus 254 on planned on identified sites. The full-year expectation income is £4 million, but unfortunately with a loss of £224,000, £224,000, but includes a loan repayment of £1 million to WBC. The full-year loss is expected to be £48,000 negative to budget. Loddon Homes has a full-year expected income of £1.7 million with profits of £475,000. That is £62,000 positive to budget. And Berrybrook Limited are expecting a full-year income of £646,000 with a profit of £464,000, meaning a positive to budget of £101,000. I recommend my part of the report to the executive. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. figures basically on Optilis are in the report, so I was just going to talk generally about things which were going on, which was the transfer of statutory services back from Optilis is running to schedule. The TUPE consultation's underway, and we expect the staff to transfer on the 1st of November. This will give one care pathway for all Wokingham residents and will improve the quality of service we offer. We're also resetting the structures and governance of the company. The new strategy of the company will be very much focused on efficiency, quality and innovation rather than growth, and you can see that in the growth sector on the report. The governance of the company is being slimmed down to give more control to the executive and more control to the senior officers and to enable the company to react quicker to things happening in the marketplace. Recruitment for a new CEO is underway and should happen very shortly. Optalis is on target to make budget for the full year 1920, and the growth figure, as I said, basically 2020 likely to be around £45 million turnover.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The paper is set out on page 29 in the agenda. Tonight we're asking for the green light to bid for capital funds to proceed with the relocating of the existing Twyford Library to the old Polehampton Boys School site, which is just opposite, so very close. It's a really exciting step in this project, and if approved tonight, it means that the council can proceed with submitting a planning application to relocate to this really beautiful building and bring new life to it, actually, and make it fit for future generations. So it's a very good project to be getting on with. Discussions are also ongoing at the moment with the Polehampton Trust to secure the lease for this site, and we're confident at the moment that we're able to enter into a deal that will secure the building and also meet their aims to promote education for the residents of the parish of Twyford. So there are 3 recommendations as set out on page 29.
I must apologise that we're here tonight. It doesn't really work on the... You can't see who you're supposed to be speaking to, but we have a royal visit tomorrow, which I'm sure you're aware of. And they've cleaned all the offices and pushed me out of my office in case. So
Didn't have an invite.
Pardon me? I think I use your office, if I may. Anyway, so I apologise for all that. Harbourfield Community Facility Operator.
Yes, page 39. This is the purpose of this is to hopefully approve Finchampstead Baptist Church as our preferred operator. There has been conversations with various other groups, and the one that's come through, and I think this comes from not just councillors but residents to say that they're already doing a fantastic job at one of our other community sites. So I think this is basically, as it says, to approve them, and the reason why we want to get them in early so that they can start working with the strategic SDL team and Crest Nicholson to start making some early decisions on the site. I recommend the paper, page 39.
Thank you, Wayne. The question I have, obviously it's called the Arborfield Green, but it's in Barkham. I'm concerned that the Baptist Church have quite a large operation not very far away from this one. And I wondered whether or not we've got any commitment on time. I mean, because I'd hate to find in the situation where they found they couldn't run the two and they just decamped back to the one in Finchampstead. So do we have a timeline that we've agreed with them on this?
There has been extensive conversations with them, and in conjunction with the local parish council and Church on the Green, and they come through that, and there's no feeling that they can't cope with both. In actual fact, it's the contrary, that they can absolutely. So, but if you look at part 2, where the second part where it says receives report at a later date, recommends specific terms of the formal agreement. If, and I don't think we will, we come to a point where we don't think they can, we have at that point got an out. But as I said, going back to the various conversations that have been had with the other two operators that come forward, but then decline to continue, I think we've got that point covered, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm really pleased that we've got the Finch Hampstead Baptist Church interested in operating this particular facility. They do it particularly well in Finch Hampstead. The only thing that I mentioned before in our discussions about this and would like to reiterate tonight is that we continue our influence over this as discussions go forward in making sure that the building is accessible for everybody in the community, and also in terms of making everybody welcome who's going to be using it and making it truly affordable for all of those in the immediate community and the wider community who will be wanting to use this facility in the future.
I agree with you, Charlotte, and I think that was one of the reasons why originally, or at the early stage, the parish council were interested to get involved. But in the conversations that have been had between FTB and the parish council, that they've been concluded that they can cover all those areas off. And it essentially is the Arborfield strategic area, isn't it? So it's got to be all things to people in Arborfield. And Barkham. And Finch Hampstead.
I'm seeking the Executive's approval of the recommendations on page 47. Shortly, the background is that the present contract will expire at the end of March 2020 and cannot be extended. We have had a consultation with schools and academies, and they have indicated that they wish Wokingham Borough Council to again organise a central procurement. So I'm seeking your approval.